Oh, of course. Hello, I'm that James guy, and it is time to get that engine right there ready to go into that car right there to replace that engine right there. So I bought my 2015 Ford Fiesta EcoBoost 1 liter 3-cylinder turbo with 2 holes in the engine. It didn't run. I bought it for $900, and here are the holes. You can see one nice one on this side. That was behind the starter. And you can see an even nicer one on this side. Yeah, so what we're going to do here is we are going to take a look at the new one and see if it is any good. I'm hoping so, because I paid money for it, $900 for it as well. So I'm into this whole thing for 1,800 bucks. And I'll put a few parts in it if it's good. I'll probably put some timing belts into it, maybe a new oil pump. Timing belt, there's only one, but there's an oil pump belt that's notorious for starting to fray and putting rubber bits all over the oil system and in the oil, and then it causes the oil screen to plug on the oil filter. I mean the oil pump. Anyway, it was a real good engine. Yeah, let's get started. So I've pulled the intake pipes apart just enough to see into the turbocharger, and wouldn't you know it, there's a whole bunch of oil coming out of the compressor outlet, and when you wiggle the compressor wheel, the shaft is broken. So one thing we know, one thing we've learned with these engines, as the turbochargers are absolute garbage. They're just junk. So I really hope the inside of this engine is kind of half decent. Here, I'm going to go to the hot side and we'll do the same thing. And we'll go ahead and wiggle the cold side compressor. So I'm wiggling that shaft exactly the way I was just doing it in that previous shot. And yeah, this turbo shaft is snapped. So needs a turbo. So it turns out this thing has a dual mass flywheel. Look at this. I guess because it's a 3-cylinder, it vibrates really hard torsionally. That's something else. So in the Focus, it gets this type of flywheel, but in the regular old Fiesta, it doesn't. I guess it's a cheap car, who cares, right? Okay, I got the engine up on my engine stand. I pre-loosened off this nut on the front of the harmonic balancer because they are tight. very, 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 very tight. I don't know how many it's like the torque is like 85 foot-pounds, and then you turn it like 360 degrees. And I found out the hard way why that is. When we get the front gear cover off, we'll take a look at it and I'll show you. But there's no keyway that holds the crankshaft sprocket for the timing belt on. It's just kind of sandwiched between the harmonic balancer and the crankshaft kind of flange, and so it gets torqued real tight so that it doesn't spin. That leads me to some other issues. I'm going to need to get special tools to time this thing, turns out. I don't think there's any way around it. But anyway, I'm going to get this thing apart. One thing I got to do is change that oil pump belt, but in order to change the oil pump belt, you have to take the actual main timing belt off. You just have to, because it's in the way. We'll get it apart and we'll get this thing upside down. We're going to check some bearings again, just like we did on my exploded engine. And then I want to get to a point where we can kind of see how many bits and pieces we actually need to buy, so we can actually like go ahead and order parts for it and kind of get it ready to put back in the car. We got the front cover off now, as you can see, but just for curiosity's sakes, look at the oil. The oil's still in there. Ever wonder what it's like to be oil in an engine? You can see kind of how that belt right there runs right into the oil where the oil pump is down there. Kind of crazy. I don't know why that's interesting to me, but whatever. Hey, as I was talking about before, this sprocket that drives the timing belt here, it is not keyed to the crankshaft. So now that I've loosened the harmonic balancer from it, this just spins freely on the crankshaft. So there's a special tool you stick in the crankshaft, and we'll go over that later when the time comes. One thing you look at when you take an oil pan off is how much shiny, sparkly things there are, and I don't see any. You know? No, there's a couple maybe sparkly things in the corner there, but nothing out of the ordinary, so yeah, maybe we're okay here on this one. Alright, well this thing sits here and drips away now that I have the pan off. I'm going to take the turbocharger off, and I'm going to take the turbocharger apart, and we're going to see the broken shaft. See little nut things on the back, kind of hold it together, which is kind of interesting. See them right here. So no real damage to the inside of the compressor. So if we had to just replace the cartridge on this thing, I'm thinking we could. Well, look at this. The nut on the end of the compressor. It was loose. And this, oh, shaft broken. There you go. Now you can actually see it. Like, look how absolutely tiny that is. Crazy. Oh, look at that. That's easy. Is it hammer time? Oh, here we go. Let's draw a line. That way we won't forget how this thing goes if we have to put this thing back together. Isn't that cute? See here, this is the hot side and the little tiny turbine. That's crazy. Oh, I wasn't expecting this. Broken turbo shaft. That looks like a weak spot. You can see how small it gets right there. It's like a step down. Okay. One more thing to buy. Okay, what we're going to do now is 3 more things. I want to do a cylinder leak down test to make sure that the valves are okay and to make sure that it's not leaking somewhere crazy, like down the cylinder walls or something like that. We're going to check the rod bearings, make sure they're okay. That's what exploded on the old engine. So we're going to make sure the rod bearings are okay and check the oil pump pickup screen. Maybe we need a new one of those. It might be full of junk like what caused it on the original engine. What was the third thing again? Oh, yes. We're going to visually check the cylinder walls, and we can do that from underneath. So once we get the piston all the way up to top, dead center, we can take a look down in the cylinders. And I know you can't see right at the top, but at least if there was some really bad scoring, I mean, we'll hear it in a leak down, but we'll be able to see if there's any major issues as well. So those 3 things. What I got to do is put the injectors back in. They had to come out because of the valve cover, or the rail had to come out, but the injectors just kind of came with them for whatever reason. I got to kind of vacuum the top up. A bunch of junk kind of fell down in there, and I don't want that to go into the cylinder, so I got to do that. I'm going to have to tighten the crank pulley back onto it because that's what holds that bottom sprocket against the crankshaft. There's no keyway on these stupid engines. I know that it might have slipped and turned a little bit, so I am going to have to crank it over a couple times just to make sure we don't have any valve to piston contact. This is an interference engine, so if it's too far at a time, there might be issues like that, but we'll crank it over a couple times to make sure. And that should be it. My leak down method is just going to be the really cheap $30 Amazon compression tester rigged up to my air compressor here. With a 30, maybe 40, 50, I don't know, PSI regulator on it. We're just going to put air to the cylinders and make sure it doesn't leak out anywhere crazy. Yeah. So it turns out these spark plugs are 14 millimeters, and guess what? This is the 14 millimeter 12-point magnetic 12-point socket that you absolutely need to do the spark plugs on BMW engines. This is going to work brilliantly. can see here the screwdriver is bottoming out on the piston, and so if we go this way, it's going down. But if we go this way, you can see how it's going up. Going up, 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 and then right there it stopped. So that's where we're going to do the leak down on cylinder 1. So here's my setup. I got the cheap compression tester hose, not onto a gauge, but onto this hose, down into my air compressor, through a regulator at 50 psi. So when I hit go on this air valve here, you can hear it's coming from here. So like cylinder leakage, but it's not like, I think this is pretty much normal. But I am hearing a little bit coming out of the intake, not the exhaust. So if I go over to the intake, try and make you hear this. I don't think it's too bad. A little bit of a leaky intake valve, probably normal for an engine with 120,000 kilometers or 70-some thousand miles. Next we'll do cylinder 2. Okay, cylinder 2 seems to hold the hissing out of the cylinder a lot longer. And there is no discernible noise coming from the intake, so number 2 is fully sealed. Okay, number 3. Kind of similar to number 2, maybe not quite as good. And no discernible noise from the intake on number 3. First thoughts, let's take a look at this oil pump screen. You can see that's all the plug part, all plugged with crap. And if you look around the corner, you can see some clean screen. So yeah, it's certainly starting to plug. I wonder if we could get away with cleaning this one. So cylinder 1, nothing really abnormal, and nothing on the other side either. Looks pretty good. Looks okay there, and looks okay on that side as well. Looks okay. Okay, rod bearing time. Start with number 1. Like I mentioned when we took it apart, took the other one apart, you can see that surface there is basically all jagged. Let's see if you can see that. See how jagged that is? That's actually broken off, not machined from the upper part of the connecting rod. So that rod looks real nice. So always have to put the same rod cap on the same rod when they're fracture split because they're mated as a pair. These rod bolts I think are one-time use, so we'll just put it together temporarily. And you can see there that that rod bearing is like brand new. Much better than on engine number 1. And you can see there that it is the same for the upper. A little bit of wear, but certainly not scorched like the original. Now each rod is marked. You can see here that there's 2 lines. Number 2. So number 1 has 1 line, number 2 has 2 lines, number 3 has 3 lines. These lines have to match up to the 3 lines on the other side on the mating surface, which is the main connecting rod. Always give them a wiggle. Not that this is the final assembly, but always am in the habit of giving a wiggle. They feel tight, but you can wiggle them with a little bit of play. That means they're good enough. This bearing, yeah, it is kind of delaminating a little bit. So there's a bit of wear. does show a bit of wear. There's a bit of funny markings on them right there. Number 1 and number 3 rod bearings on engine A were actually in much better shape than these ones, so I wonder if I should just swap them over. I know that sounds hokey, right? But that's okay. Hokey's my middle name. And we got in play, so we're good. And I think that's a good place to stop for today. That's the extent of the evaluation on this thing. There's a lot of things, mostly gaskets and seals, intake valve leak on number 1. I don't know what's too much. Little tiny hissing noise going into the intake. It's got a turbo, so does it really need to seal all that well? Like a turbo just kind of pushes it all in. Anyway, please comment, give me comments. What's normal for a little bit of intake valve leakage? The exhausts aren't leaking at all. It's just number 1 intake. Slightly clogged oil pump screen. I'm gonna have to try and clean that because I think I can clean it. It doesn't seem too bad. Maybe I'll wash it backwards through the pump with solvent or something. What else? Turbocharger. I think I've seen some on eBay for really cheap from China. Is it worth the risk? I don't know. Comments. I need your comments right now. Also, if you have the tool to hold the camshaft and pin the crankshaft and do the whole timing thing on this engine, and you want to like send it to me for me to borrow, oh, I would love you forever. That would be amazing. Yeah, they're about $215 on Amazon, and it's just too much. So, do I pull the head? Do I leave it? I think I'm going to leave it. Anyway, next time, I hope to have a whole bunch of parts. Hey, I'll put a parts list right here for you to like, this is what I'm going to get as of right now. And, yeah, big list. And, hey, if you found this even just a little bit useful or mildly entertaining, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you next time.